Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the June 22nd, 2017 edition of The Breast There Is, The Breast There Was, and The Breast There Ever Will Be Wrestling Podcast. As always, I am your host, Mikey B, and I must say that for the first time since the week of WrestleMania, the WWE's two primary television shows, Raw and Smackdown, gave us back-to-back nights of solid programming. I know I must sound disappointed most of the time with the decisions, or lack thereof, by the WWE, and it's not because I'm an unhappy person, it's because the quality of the stories are substandard, at least when compared to other eras. And that's why someone like me can get so frustrated with today's program. I've seen them do it better in the past, and there is no reason why they can't repeat themselves. Even though this current crop on the roster isn't the all-time greatest, they could have a better era with combining the two rosters into one. Best wrestlers stays, the weaker ones lose their spot and go down to NXT. Anyways, I can go and I will go on about this on another show because there's too much to say about that, and there's also too much to say about this. This week kicked off with the Extreme Rules pay-per-view show on the weekend. This pay-per-view was a Smackdown exclusive show. This show could have been much better than it was, with some very questionable booking decisions occurring. And as a result of this questionable booking, for the first time, my prediction percentage has dropped below 50%. There were 5 matches announced on the main card, but at the show itself, another match was announced between Breezango and The Ascension. For the record, I would have guessed this one correctly, as Breezango were victorious, but of course, since I didn't have the chance to announce it on my program beforehand, it doesn't count. And while I'm not going to make excuses for my incorrect picks, there are a few things which did not work in my favor. The first one is that of the 5 matches, 2 of them were Money in the Bank matches. And while most times in predictions for wrestling you have a 50% chance, with the odd triple threat match giving you a 33% chance, these 2 matches gave you 20% and 17% odds respectively. And there is one match in particular which I blame my wrong prediction on the poor direction of the company. The match in question is the SmackDown Women's Championship match between champion Naomi and Lana. Lana just made her return recently and had never had a singles match before. The odds were against her significantly. Normally, while I wouldn't bet on a first-time wrestler like this, I did because she happens to be married to another wrestler named Rusev, who on television said on more than one occasion 2 months ago that he demanded to be in a title match at this specific pay-per-view or else he might quit the show. After those first few mentions of this by Rusev, the WWE seemed to change their minds and instead ignore this. As far as I'm concerned, this is a big no-no. You don't advertise something like this as recently as 2 months ago and not follow up on it. And I chose Lana because I believed that Rusev would at least return here and help his wife win, causing a distraction or something like that. There were even chants for Rusev during this match, which were very audible. Though I don't get credit for this pick, the WWE should take responsibility for their poor decision-making and grant me a credit for this pick. They owe me and the rest of the WWE Universe better storytelling than this. Unless there are serious injuries occurring, there is no reason for this company to introduce a story or program and then dismiss it without any explanation. Simple as that. So, the pay-per-view featured the first ever women's Money in the Bank match. This match opened the show and was incredibly disappointing as James Ellsworth ran up the ladder and grabbed the briefcase and handed it down to Carmella in a controversial finish. While 3 referees were conferring outside the ring trying to decide what to do, with the competitors waiting nearby for a ruling, Ellsworth then just grabs a microphone and announces that Carmella won, which apparently was enough to make this ruling official, which is completely inexplicable. The other victors of the night were the New Day, who won their tag team title match by countout, meaning the Usos retained their belts, which was a cheap ending. Also, Jinder Mahal retained his WWE Championship by defeating Randy Orton. The main event of the night saw Baron Corbin win the men's Money in the Bank match. The pay-per-view was alright, but things really got interesting on the 2 shows. Monday Night Raw opened with Roman Reigns discussing his SummerSlam announcement. He came down to the ring saying that he will face whoever wins between Brock Lesnar and Samoa Joe. Joe then came down to the ring and confronted Reigns, and it was announced that the 2 of them would compete later on in the night. A little bit later, backstage, Kurt Angle was talking to Corey Graves and Enzo and Big Cass, and told the tag team that he would figure out who was responsible for their attacks in recent weeks by the end of the show. Finally, we get some answers here. Soon after, Seth Rollins and Bray Wyatt continued their feud by taking verbal jabs at each other. Like I mentioned earlier, with the WWE's creative team making sloppy, hasty decisions and then ignoring them, The company also abandoned a Bray Wyatt-Finn Balor feud that they had been pushing for a few weeks after WrestleMania. Again, neither guy suffered a serious injury, so the WWE did a lousy job with the handling of that. At the end of the second hour of the show, Roman Reigns and Samoa Joe were doing battle when all of a sudden in the arena we start hearing beeping noises. The camera then moves up to the Titantron as we see an ambulance backing up. Then the ambulance back doors open and out comes the incredibly destructive beast Braun Strowman. The crowd went ballistic at the sight of Strowman. Michael Cole was quick to point out that he wasn't supposed to be back for 6 months, even though this was a work. A work is something that is scripted beforehand that appears to be unplanned. In this case, Braun Strowman in real life did injure himself, but it wasn't as serious as the 6-month time frame that the WWE announced. It was more like a month to a month and a half being injured. So why would the company project such a longer injury outlook? The reason for doing this is that it makes the wrestler, in this case, Strowman, look all the more resilient and strong by returning so much earlier. And make no mistake, the company wants to make Strowman look real tough. Strowman then came down to the ring and beat the living hell out of Roman Reigns shortly after losing to Samoa Joe due to the distraction caused by Braun. After pummeling Reigns, Braun then announced that they will face each other in an ambulance match at the Great Balls of Fire pay-per-view show. Moving on in the show, The Miz hosted Miz TV to apologize to his wife for accidentally knocking her down and destroying a gift she had for him in previous weeks. Dean Ambrose came down to the ring, which also had two bears dressed up in the ring. Or two people dressed up as bears, I should say. After Ambrose attacked Miz, the two bears then began attacking Ambrose. The two bears revealed themselves to be Bo Dallas and Curtis Axel, whom The Miz confronted backstage earlier in the night and asked to be a part of his entourage, saying that they would get tag team title shots by his side. The tag team appeared to have agreed, as this faction seems to have now formed. And now to the end of the show, as Kurt Angle joined Enzo and Big Cass in the ring to discuss what he knows. He also had suspects, The Big Show, and the tag team, The Revival, show up to plead their cases. After all of them were exonerated, then Corey Graves spoke up from the announce table and said how he had video proof of the culprit. The video then showed Big Cass backstage a week ago, setting up a scene in which he looked like he was about to be attacked, or he was attacked. Then the truth came out as Big Cass announced to the world that he was fed up with being Enzo's tag team partner and that Enzo was holding him down for years, which is why he has never won a championship. These attacks that Big Cass had on Enzo means that Big Cass is now a full-fledged heel. I said this a few weeks ago on my podcast here that this would eventually happen, but I wasn't expecting it to come this soon. The team, despite not ever winning a title, was still red hot with fans, and in every arena where they visited, they had the crowd going along word for word doing their chant, myself included watching from home. I think it's a shame that they never got to win titles together, as their win would definitely have gotten a huge pop from the crowd, but in a logical move by Vince, not winning ever gave more incentive for Big Cass to walk away and do this. They could have made him separate from Enzo in an honest, direct way, which would have kept Cass as a babyface good guy, but clearly Vince wants him to be a heel, so that's how they executed this. Definitely a shocking finale to the episode, but was entertaining throughout. People are also probably wondering what will happen to Enzo now. One possible path is for him to go down to cruiserweight level and eventually win a title there before coming back to the main show, proving that he can be a champion and maybe face off against Cass. Otherwise, Enzo, in my eyes, is destined to be an amazing ringside manager for some wrestler. And if I were him, from a physical perspective, I'd be happy to assume that position instead of taking bumps all the time in the ring. He is definitely gifted on the mic, and the company will probably turn him into this role more than likely eventually. He might work as a singles jobber until then, too. Nobody knows besides Vince what will happen to him. Moving on to Smackdown Live, after the controversial Women's Money in the Bank match, each participant confronted newly returned General Manager Daniel Bryan to plead their case. Dolph Ziggler then faced Shinsuke Nakamura in one of the finest matches I've seen on SmackDown in a long time. This match was also much better than their pay-per-view match with Nakamura's debut. And like that match, Nakamura was again the victor. Kevin Owens then came out and issued an open challenge for his United States Championship. He said he wanted someone from this city that they were in. AJ Styles then came down and said he wanted to fight. Owens turned him away, reminding him he was facing someone who was from there, which Styles was not. He wound up facing and defeating Chad Gable from the tag team American Alpha. With Zack Ryder's recent return, the Hype Bros confronted Daniel Bryan, saying that they should get a title shot. Bryan then gave them a match with the Usos for next week. Following this announcement backstage, Bryan then headed down to the ring to announce his decision regarding the women's Money in the Bank match result. After all the participants came down to the ring, Bryan, after being criticized by James Ellsworth, stripped Carmella of the briefcase and then proclaimed that there would be a rematch next week on Smackdown. It's funny because the crowd was so pumped about the announcement of the rematch and then started booing when it was announced it would be for next week. I must say that in a situation like this where the company knew that they would make a rematch, they should have opened the show with this decision and made the match for that night following the pay-per-view instead of this next week stuff. The crowd obviously expressed their disappointment, and I can't blame them. Why drag this out longer? The winner from the men's Money in the Bank match was also surprisingly absent from the show. I don't see Baron Corbin as a main event guy yet. I think he definitely needs work on the mic. Give him a heel manager like Paul Heyman or something because he simply isn't prepared yet to be a top heel. All right, guys, that about does it for all the important events in this particularly eventful week in the WWE. Be sure to like and subscribe below if you liked what you heard. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.